ago now, and such a rocking show. You guys did such an amazing time bringing the blues to town.
Yeah.
Let me start with questions about Dr. Z and Deeper Root. Is that did we get to see the normal lineup? Are those players that were here in Rice Lake the same players that you play out with all the time?
We tend to. We have another guitar player, Sean Copenhaver, who joins us a lot. Our next big endeavor here is we're doing an Allman Brothers tribute for Decadent Cabaret here in Eau Claire.
That's the
They'll
43rd
happen.
Decadent, isn't it? The 43rd?
Yeah, March 1st actually is the day. It's actually that Thursday, the day before, so the last day of February, and then March 1st and 2nd. So we're at 6 o'clock on March 1st.
You're gonna
So
have to put that on your calendars if you're listening. You don't want to miss that. And Allman Brothers always they've got such a great catalog of music.
it is, and it's going to go quick. We've been practicing a lot, and it's just a load of fun. We've got three guitar players that are really into this music and keys and everything. So it's a big band, and it's really fun. But this band actually is really the host band for the blues jam that we do here. It's right now we're running it third Friday of every month here in Eau Claire at the Burke House. So
And that's something that you've been doing for a little while here, and it's something that you invite just kind of any musician to come and
right,
play and be a part of,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's an open jam. And it's a blues jam, but we've had people that have gotten up and I think we welcome blues-based music, and to me that's one of the education pieces that I personally am real big on is learning how the blues influenced all kinds of other musical styles, and so it's we welcome everybody. Actually, really, we had a trumpet player who came all the way from Twin Cities last time we did it, and a lot of guitar players and singers get up, and it's a load of fun.
You know,
So
that's you bring up kind of an interesting point that blues is you've got your traditional blues, straight blues. It's
yeah,
nothing but the blues. But then, like you mentioned, the blues are kind of the foundation of so many different other musical genres. From you can get jazz that's influenced by blues, country that's influenced by blues, rock and roll that's blues. What would you say is kind of your favorite offshoot of blues?
so one of the things that I'm working on right now is putting a late '60s, '70s tribute sort of band together that's going to focus on all those bands that were part of. We start talking about scenes and collaboration and stuff like that. Mostly that came out of the British invasion and then influenced a lot of American bands, and Led Zeppelin and Montrose and Humble Pie and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what the music I grew up on, Cream and all those sorts of bands. And so some of the members of Dr. Z and Deeper Roots, my bass player wife, is part of that, and our keyboard player, Jay Sinner Kristen, is with us in that, and then we've added a couple of other people. But it's going to, as is typical with a lot of this stuff, it's going to be, we're going to have some of the people that play with Dr. Z sitting in on some songs and things like that. So that's kind of the way this stuff goes.
Especially with the Blues Summit and the Blues Jam that you do, it
Yeah.
seems like you're kind of cultivating a community, or like you alluded to, a scene of musicians that, with the talent that you brought to Rice Lake with Dr. Z and Deep Root, and I can only imagine with these blues jams, something tells me that this is going to be one of those eras, in especially the Eau Claire area, that people look back on as kind of a foundation of something that's yet to come.
Well, I'm hoping that the Blues Summit that you mentioned was a three-band show that we, and I mean collectively, it was Stefan Geisinger who played with us up at Rice Lake in the Dr. Z band, who has his own band, and then a really incredible guitar player named Nick Foytek and his band. The three of us did a collective show that took place here in Eau Claire, and then we invited a lot of other players in. We had, I think, I was trying to count the other day. I think we had 5 or 6 other people that came in and sat in and played with us, and that's one of the whole focuses of that is that I said, I mean, part of my philosophy is that a lot of this music has been born out of collaboration and sharing, and I mean it's really part of the history of blues, that we can carry this music on and actually put in really exciting shows together, by bringing people in to collaborate in real time, it was a great success. We had a lot of fun, and had quite a few people that showed up to have fun with us. So
Outside of things like Nashville writers circles or the writer circles that happen in music hubs, for lack of a better word, throughout the country, it seems that the collaborative part of music is really what solidifies the success of a scene. You think about, like I said, Nashville, or if you think
yeah,
back to the early days of grunge music, the Seattle scene, or the early days
yeah,
of punk in New York City, a lot of that was born out of bands that maybe didn't necessarily know what they were doing other than playing their instrument, but got together with other musicians that were playing other instruments or playing the same instruments in a different way, and learning from each other. And that sounds
yeah.
a lot like what you've got going on.
Well, it's what I mean. That's always sort of the influence for me is I'm kind of a student of history, and you mentioned the Seattle grunge scene. That was an incredible collaborative scene too, and of course the whole British invasion was built around some of the things that happened in London, and one of my favorite stories is. Peter Frampton, who was a young kid, trying to find his way in the music scene, being introduced to the great Steve Marriott, who was with the Small Faces at the time, by Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones.
Sure.
We just took him along, and out of that was born Humble Pie after Steve decided to leave Small Faces, and I think I was you mentioned the punk scene, and I Dave Grohl's documentary, the Sonic Highways documentary. There's a bunch of different examples that Dave brings up there. One being the collaborative scene in Washington D.C. between the punk scene and the funk scene, and they were putting on their own shows. And then the punk scene would show up to support the funk scene, and they would do some collaborative shows, but they supported each other, and I think that's really the foundation of how it works. And I think we've got some things like that here in the state of Wisconsin that I use as models for the things that I think about as we consider how we could move forward and different ideas we would have, and so. But I'm always looking to the history of that stuff and just fascinated by how it all came about.
This last
So
weekend, I got to watch the June documentary about June Carter,
yeah,
and hearing the story everybody knows of Johnny and June, but
yeah,
told from the June perspective. And one of the things
right.
that really stood out to me in that was I can't remember where they were living at the time, but they had this house that seemed to be centrally located within a music scene. And while they weren't necessarily at the top of their game, and they weren't necessarily touring out so much, this was, I think, just before the Highwaymen and kind of the resurgence. They would have a young a young Waylon Jennings, and other kind of
Yeah,
country greats come over to their house, and they'd have all these people that would just share their new songs, what they were working on, and find inspiration without it necessarily being in a venue in front of public, kind of just at home with these what would become great musicians, swapping ideas and sharing their ideas of songwriting and crafting. And I think that's
yeah,
such.
and the other example is Laurel Canyon, the whole scene over there outside of L.A. with out of that whole collaboration came Mamas and Papas, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Buffalo Springfield. Jackson Brown came out of that, and all these people were living with each other and sharing music and sitting in each other's living rooms and critiquing each other and supporting and introducing them to A&R people from different labels and just all of those sorts of things. But boy, I tell you that if we think about the influence of things like that on what music has become, particularly American music, I mean, it's astounding, but it was all collaborative and all about sharing and all about building, in many ways, for many of these scenes, building stuff on their own and certainly not being dependent on anybody else, whether it was a club owner or anything. I mean, they really built the scene was built by artists for artists and with this whole collaborative spirit. And I think that's sometimes what's missing in places, and certainly one of the things that we're trying to bring back here.
This happened maybe 10, maybe more years ago than that. I was fresh to the music scene here in Rice Lake and in music in general. I still don't know many more chords on a guitar than I did back then. But I was fortunate enough to be invited by a local musician by the name of Chad Costner to, I don't know what he called it, but it was essentially an artist weekend where
Oh,
he had access to a hunting cabin. And this
yeah.
was in the middle of winter, but off season of hunting. And from Thursday through Sunday, it was an open invite for every local musician that heard about it to show up, spend the night. They had 20 beds. They all, there enough alcohol to keep multiple countries not sober for many days. But also, it is some food, breakfast. You wake up in the morning, and it's right back to jamming and
Yeah.
collaborating. And since then, I've been craving moments like that, and it seems, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't seem to be something that happens too much anymore. And maybe that's because of the internet and being able to have conversations like you and I are having from different cities
Yeah.
and locations. But would you say that with the current state of especially local music, that the way we collaborate has changed?
Well, I think that, COVID in particular changed a lot of stuff, and um, that, the venues have shut down, and there may be bands and musicians that really aren't playing as much as they used to, all that kind of stuff. But I think that the need for that kind of collaboration is probably more than ever. I mean, I hear a lot of musicians complaining about, well, we just don't get paid. There aren't places to play, and that was one of the reasons why we put the summit together. Is, well, all right, well, I don't want to sit around and complain about it. We've got a place, and let's put something together. And for all of us, we would have done it for free just to do it. And I actually, I mean, your example is something that I've heard from other places. I know of other people that I know over on the eastern side of the state that have done similar things. And of course, one example that I think is really important that people know about here in Wisconsin is the Steel Bridge Music Festival and Songwriting Festival that takes place over in Sturgeon Bay area. And the work that Pat McDonald, who was it has some success back in the '90s with Timbuk 3, and then moved back after that band broke up and moved back to Sturgeon Bay. Bought a hotel, which is called, it's like stepping into the 1950s to go into the hotel, and then a warehouse next door. And when there was a lot of this began when there was talk of a steel bridge. It was a Civil War era steel bridge that was out in front of the hotel that Pat had bought, and they were going to tear it down. The city of Sturgeon Bay was, and so he brought a bunch of his music friends together. They put a concert together. They included Jackson Brown. I think was talking about him too from the whole Laurel Canyon era, but he was one of the people that was invited and played there, and I a number of friends that played with him that day. And out of that also was born a songwriting festival that happens twice a year. And the Steel Bridge one, I think that's a spring one, if I remember right. But people can apply, come over there, and they bring people together, and they literally sit and do almost like a spin the bottle and choose who they're going to be using as songwriting partners. And they write songs, record those songs, and then all the musicians that are part of that also do shows together, collaborative concerts up and down the whole Door Peninsula during the time that that's all going on. And then they do it in the fall again around Halloween, and they call that Dark Songs. So if
Sure.
you go to the if you go to the Holiday Music Hotel, which is the hotel that I'm talking about, that that is the soundtrack. The songs written for Dark Songs and the Steel Bridge Festival is the soundtrack of the hotel. So
It sounds like it's got to be a stop on any Wisconsin musician's bucket list there. It
yeah,
was,
yeah, and and I had a friend that moved, and this is one of the other thing that happens. I know of at least two people that have moved to Sturgeon Bay just to be part of that whole scene there.
you know,
Oh, yeah,
that's you hear about that with other musicians and in other time periods and things where you had such a magnetized scene or feeling or
yeah,
I don't want to use the word potential necessarily, but something about a certain area that just time and place and the right people it creates something magical that a lot of times can't be duplicated or recreated in the same way. Would you say that
yeah.
Sturgeon Bay is kind of in that category of mythical musical places?
Yeah, I'm in Wisconsin. I think it's certainly a place I've visited. We went over and recorded in the recording studio that's in the warehouse next to the hotel there, and it's amazing. There's a lot of clubs over there and a lot of just incredible musicians that have moved into the area, and that creates a real synergy that has had some real impacts. I think outside of that, I know at least one person who's competed in nationally in a blues competition from the area there, and she had moved up from she was down south somewhere and moved all the way up to Sturgeon Bay to be part of that. So yeah, and that that's a lot of what we're trying to reproduce here. We're trying to bring friends together, and we really see it that way. Hanging out in my basement studio here in the house here playing is something we all look forward to, and not necessarily because we are out playing gigs a lot that because all of us have our own other projects, but it's just the synergy, and we love it when other people come and be part of that as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
How long have you been playing in Wisconsin?
Since I was probably I was in high school when I had my first band down in it was actually in Wanakee, Wisconsin, just outside of Madison.
And have
And
you always been a blues player? Is that kind of where you started, honed
well,
your
no,
skill?
so really what I was influenced and where I started was really with the blues rock stuff. That first probably really awful band that I had. Um, we were playing, Cream and the music that Montrose and all the music that we were listening to at the time. And and then I mean I always tell the story too, especially when I'm teaching. That's another thing that I do is I was listening to Crossroads by Cream and discovered that they didn't write the song, which put me on a journey that was a couple of decades of really deep diving into blues music and finding out what that history was.
I think
So,
that I am just now starting my journey into the blues. I've always kind of been a passing fan of blues music, but over the last year or so, I booked. I asked a venue if you could book any genre, what would it be? And they said blues. So I said, well, I'm going to find a blues band.
yeah,
And so I found a blues band, and then I didn't realize when I started that there were so many quality blues musicians in our area. So I guess for me,
Uh,
being relatively new to the scene, you can speak a little bit better to it. It seems like Wisconsin has a rich blues scene now that I guess I'm not sure how long it's been going, but it seems like it's picking up steam. Is that a fair assessment as a relatively newbie?
yeah, well, I think so. I mean, have always been some. There are award-winning musicians in Wisconsin. You know, Jimmy Vagley and the band the Jimmies out of Southwest Wisconsin. And what's funny about that is that we have mutual friends that have been together, all that sorts of things. And our grandfathers knew each other because they ran farms down in the Southwest Wisconsin area, and Jimmy still runs a farm down that way, but has toured all over the world. Is doing a lot of really cool collaborative stuff with some artists out of other places in the country, and has become really well known. Reverend Raven. I've had friends and bandmates that have played with him as well. He's out of the Milwaukee area. And then there's a lot of blues bands that I know of, out of Sturgeon Bay and even Oshkosh area and the Fox Valley area that I think have gained some notoriety. And then not far away too. I mean, part of it is too that influence from Chicago, and another hotbed of blues right now is Northern Indiana. A lot of Chicago blues artists have moved up that way, and there's a really, really active and collaborative blues society in Northern Indiana. I have the privilege of going down and playing some festivals down there. Um, so,
Would you say that? I guess for me, I did. I neglected to realize the actual hub that cities like Chicago and Minneapolis tend to be, because if you're a music fan, but just a passing music fan, or you just listen to the radio, and you don't dive so much into the history, you kind of forget that Chicago and Minneapolis both, and they both have unique and different sounds, but both
yeah.
of them have produced stellar musicians and stellar acts for not just recently, but many years.
Yeah, and out of all genres too. I had heard recently because my oldest son is a musician who lives in the Twin Cities, and that are a lot of musicians that are moving from Nashville or Austin, Texas, which are loaded with, like you throw a rock and you're going to hit 10 guitar players in either one of those towns, and they're moving to Minneapolis or St. Paul, just because the music opportunity in the scene is great, and of course. Prince was out of that area, and then great bands like the Replacements and a whole ton of bands of all genres are out of the Twin Cities as well. So,
If
yeah, a
folk,
lot of influences.
if folks are listening to this and thinking, I'm a musician, I would love to collaborate and work on or create be a part of a scene. What advice would you give? Whether that's somebody that is thinking about checking out your blues jams, or maybe wants to start their own collaborative project. What would you say that somebody needs to know going into something like that?
Well, reach out. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, I am really, really big on going out to support other artists, and I think that's one of the things that really, really makes a scene. And so I've made some great friends, and actually, my youngest son and I run a sound company too, and I've met people and do work with them now, running sound, doing other kinds of stuff like that, um, and especially reach out even if you're not in the area. I have helped other people with ideas for how to start jams, and really have tried to support other people in that endeavor too. But it's all about who you know, and uh, what my experience has been too. And this was certainly true in the blues world. I mean, it's that kind of collaboration and mentoring is really part of the blues tradition. I learned how to play the blues because somebody taught me, sat down with me, jammed with me when we were out playing. I was really taught how to do it, how to be in a blues band, all of those sorts of things, how to play with other musicians well, and by that direct connection.
Yeah, I think that's
So
especially when I was first starting out with music and trying to be a musician. That's something that I think I took for granted, and maybe it's because I've always been more of a hip hop musician than anything else. But
yeah,
wasn't until later on that I realized the value of collaborating, and not
yeah,
necessarily, in hip hop you have features and people working on songs, but that's not
yeah,
necessarily what collaborating has to mean. Like you said, it's setting up these events, these summits, these open jams where people can
yeah,
get to know each other, their musical styles, without any sort of pressure of performance. I mean, obviously, if you're playing music, you're performing in some capacity, but
yeah.
performing for musicians and performing for a general public is two completely different things.
Yeah, I think the just that whole collaborative process is really where it starts. Though my son is sort of tangentially connected to a hip hop scene over in the Twin Cities, and I've been to some shows over there where there were numerous hip hop artists, and it was just they set up in a storefront studio. And it's all about sharing and collaboration, and it's much the same.
One of the things
um,
that I've always appreciated about music across all genres, it's super evident in things like blues and punk and hip hop, is
yeah,
that DIY mentality, and,
yeah,
and
right.
I think I mean less of putting, like in my case, taking whatever shitty equipment that you've had laying around for years and making it
Yeah,
worth the best that you
yeah,
can, but
right.
more just taking whatever it is that you have, whether that's that beat down equipment or just basic understanding of what you want to do, and just going for it and making it work in whatever way you can. How important would you say that is to, especially the foundation of a scene?
Oh, well, we all have to begin somewhere. And the beautiful thing about the technology today is that you there's opportunities that are it's very different than it was when I was first starting out. You wanted to record something back then, you were either limited to maybe you had a cassette recorder laying around the house that you could record yourself on, but going to a recording studio was relatively expensive, and it was really the only way that you could do multi-tracking for a long time. And now there are some really great free digital audio workstations that are out there, so those opportunities are pretty great. But I mean, that's part of what we all laugh about, is kind of how we all started with the gear that we had. And it was a lot of times it was not just gear that we had, but it was gear that friends shared with us, because maybe you couldn't afford to buy an amplifier, and you had the guitar, but and maybe it was just a cheap guitar from Sears, but you were doing what you could with what you had. And back in the day too, we were hooking microphones into our guitar amplifiers just so we could go out and be heard. And there was some pretty low tech shows back during that time. And it's a little different now, but I know people that are doing similar things just to get through shows even still today. So
You never
yeah,
know when a piece of equipment is going to decide that today's the day that I'm going to break forever, and in that case, you do what you can. We had
yeah,
we had a band that played here in Rice Lake back in December. That phenomenal band, very talented band. Every artist in the band is exceptional talent. But one of the members forgot I don't think it was a power chord, but one of the chords that made the keyboard work like a keyboard. And you mentioned the lo-fi solutions, but going in the other direction, he was able to hop on his phone on one of the musician Facebook groups in the area, and somebody, I believe it was from Cumberland, came to Rice Lake and dropped off the chord that he needed, and then came back for the show and picked it up at the end of it. So it's crazy
yeah,
to think
yeah.
how it all has changed.
Yeah, I mean that has, but there's still still, I remember a show we were doing in with our band in Wausau, and our drummer forgot his snare.
Oh
I
no.
had I had a I had a snare for him in moments. One phone call to a friend of mine outside of Wausau, and we were able to run up and pick one up, and we were good to go and started on time and all that. But yeah, we all know each other, and that's kind of the thing that is really cool about it. Is I taught for a while in a school in Madison, and there was a young guy who's now a pretty well-known guitar player in the Chicago blues and jazz scene, and he didn't have a good amplifier to gig with, and so he was borrowing mine, and so
I think
yeah,
that
that's sometimes how it starts.
that goes back to kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation, the importance of networking and going to other people's shows and setting up these collaborative jam events, so that when you run into a situation, I mean, it doesn't have to be completely self-serving, but it's nice when you run into a situation where you've got friends kind of all over the state or all over the United States, for that matter, that can help you out in a pinch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gear goes down, even under the best of circumstances. And, it is all about that. We've always also, I've met some incredible people on the road doing festivals in different places. And just, we all talk about the same stuff. We're all sharing on that same level, whether there's somebody that's out there that's a major touring act and that's well known, or just a local musician. And we all have our stories of how we started and the stuff that we do, and even share gear.
And
So
I'll relate a story from an artist I talked to earlier this week. In full disclosure, he's my cousin, actually. His name's Dylan Martinson, and he just set out on his first tour of Florida. He's never been to Florida before this, had no venue connections before heading out to Florida. He had an RV that he was going to take down to Florida. The RV broke down before he could even start the journey. Had planned on then just kind of gigging it out of the car, keeping the clothes in the car, and going with that. But he gets to Florida, met some different venues, built a repertoire with them, if you will, and also met some very lovely people that had a houseboat. That while he's doing this tour, he gets to fall back on that houseboat for a little while, and it goes back again to that power of collaboration, and you never know
yeah,
who you're going to meet that might be able to help you out in one way or another. Having a houseboat readily available, you probably is an extreme example, but
yeah,
you never know. You never know what you could find, especially when you get out there and start talking with other musicians and other venues. What would you say? Because you've done a lot of shows, a lot of booking out. What would you say is the most common mistake that musicians, whether they're just starting out or they've been doing this for a while, what is one of the most common mistakes artists make when trying to book out to other places, whether that's somewhere new or following a certain circuit?
well, I'd say, finding venues that work for you. And again, I think it just comes back to what we were just talking about. Other musicians tend to be the ones that can steer you towards the places that would work best for your band. And, I know that certainly has worked for us. My introduction even to the area down there in northern Indiana that I was talking about was all through people that I knew who had connections with other musicians and people that were running clubs. And we were able to do some really fun, exciting shows down there, and to be part of some really big things that were certainly life-changing events for me in many ways. Getting able to meet some of my music heroes and hang around with them backstage, all that sort of stuff. But it all came through people that you know.
It,
And then what's fun is that when it happens, that when it extends, my son was able to open for one of the people that we met on a show down in northern Indiana. And so he opened for him in the Twin Cities when they were coming through on a tour. So
It's always fun when things kind of come full circle like that, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, that was, and it was a lot of fun, and it's just the relationships you make with people backstage when you're just kind of hanging out are really really fun and unique. So yeah, it's great. And as I said, whether you're a major touring act or just somebody local, we all talk about the same things. We all look for the same things. We all have the same kinds of stories, and it's almost like you're instant friends right from the get-go. So
If somebody's looking for story swapping, for idea sharing, and music, when is the next time that you've got something going on?
So the next Blues Jam is actually next Sunday at 2 o'clock at the Brick House here in Eau Claire.
So is that going to be
Yeah, not this Sunday. My wife is right over here. She just right. So the 18th, yes.
Sure.
And so that'll be the third Sunday of every month right now. We're thinking of maybe going to twice a month. We're gonna just kind of feel it out with that. But that would be one big thing, and then we'll be at Decadent Cabaret, which is an incredible event with many artists over a 3-day period, and that happens at the same place actually, at the Brick House in Eau Claire. So
And you do a lot of writing about music and
yeah.
about these events. Where's the best place for folks to both find your show dates and your blogs about music?
So right now, Dr. Z and Deeper Roots is the band that we're playing with the most, and that's Dr. Z and Deeper Roots. You can find that if you just do a search on Google. You can find that. But other things that we have going on too would be, if you look on Facebook, Eau Claire Blues Jam would be one way to connect with us. The writing, the blog that I keep is, which is a music related blog. It's not strictly about blues. It's about music in general. Is I'm with the band. I'm hyphen and so on. So
And that's you cut out there just a little bit. That was I'm hyphen with
right.
band .com, and we can
Yeah, and actually, if you go to my band, the bio page on my band website, you can find a link there too. So
and we'll be sure to share that on Dirty Chai Radio's Facebook page as well. Mark, I want to
sounds
thank
great.
you for taking
All right.
taking time out of your Friday morning to sit down and talk with us about all this great music that we've got in the area.
Yeah. Oh yeah, my pleasure. I love all the stuff you're doing up there, and we hope to get back up there soon.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment.